The minivan shootout, something people have been asking us to do for the better half of 72 years, and here it is. Get ready to take your blood pressure medication because it's gonna go up. In this video, it was critically important to me to cover the real world stuff, like depreciation, reliability, the ease of use, how you actually live with and use a utility vehicle like this, a minivan, something that's gonna be in your family garage for a long time. So let's just get right into it. So the exterior, we don't talk a lot about this because it's subjective, but when you park all three of these together, there's some things you gather right away. The Odyssey is definitely the oldest of the bunch, circa 2018. So it looks like a car front end tacked on a minivan. It's the least inspiring of the bunch. And that's going to be a huge issue for some people, but others, not a problem. The Sienna, definitely, they tried to push the boundaries of what it was, trying to get away from that minivan look by making it look like a bullet train. And honestly, it's going to work in some angles, and then other angles, it just looks horribly awkward. They do have some different color options for the Sienna, thank God. It makes it look far more interesting than, let's say, the Odyssey, but I'll leave that to you. The Carnival is definitely the most modern of the bunch. It has a good mix between SUV and van. It's more squared off. Again, it's indicative of the era that it was designed in, but in darker colors, when you look at this thing from the side, namely in black, it looks like a hearse because of the silver accent on the back, the rear quarter glass. So again, you're going to decide, but what you really care about is how you use the interior space of this. And we're going to start, and I'm going to kind of give these each a ranking so it makes it more digestible. Let's start with door storage. And it sounds silly, but this is what you're interacting with every day if you have a family. You need a place to put things, from sanitizer to snacks to wipes, your bottles, anything you can think of, your phone. And the winner of the door storage is the Odyssey. The Odyssey has a triple tiered storage where you can put something in the door handle, the middle tier, and the bottom. And the big reason this wins is because you can fit a 32-ounce bottle and a 24-ounce bottle upright without it tipping over or fighting the plastics. You can still fit a phone, you can still fit your keys, you can fit sunglasses in there. It is definitely, once you get used to this and how much you can put in the doors if you need to, it definitely dominates the other two. Second place is the Sienna because it does have triple tiered storage. The only problem with the Sienna is the lower storage does not hold those size of bottles. You have to fight with the plastics. It's only going to hold a smaller bottle, like water bottles, and that center plane of the second row there is smaller than the Odyssey as well. Although, the door handle area is good for placing a phone. I can't live like this. How am I supposed to live like this? I can't get my drinks in the door. Hey, you know what? I'm 5'2". I gotta sit right on the steering wheel. I can't get my coffee in the door, I said. Third place is the Carnival, and I will say this overall, the Carnival is definitely just basically, they didn't redesign this to be a van. They lifted a lot what they did with their SUVs, and storage is probably the worst across the board, at least in the frontal occupancy space. When we get to the center plane, or the dashboard, and the center armrest, in first place for the dashboard area is the Sienna because you have storage and anti-slip areas for the driver, center area, and the passenger. You can fit phones, sunglasses, the wireless chargers on the center plane, so you have really good usability of the dashboard space. But the Sienna is not so bad, but they focus more on having the physical controls on the center dashboard, so it takes up a lot of space. So if you value physical controls, not having everything in the touchscreen, you're really going to like the Odyssey. Again, the Carnival is in last place here because it's just a normal vehicle. Let's talk about center console space, and this is an interesting one. The Sienna looks great because they're trying to do this flying like buttress, this bridge, to make it look more modern, not so minivan. And then they have this huge chasm down below where you can put bags, purses, things, but it's wide open. Things are going to roll around if it's loose. So that's the kind of counterpoint here. It has an enormous center armrest in the Sienna as well, and 4 cup holders, and a place to put your phone. So again, there's a lot of storage options, but not all of it's completely usable because it is the only one of the bunch with a physical shifter. You slam it all the way down into drive, go all the way up into park. It's so easy to use. Where the Odyssey has push button, and then the Carnival has the rotary ring. But the Odyssey is the big winner here because you remove that bridge, you have drawer systems where you can put things, you can stow it away if you're not using it, so the storage becomes more hidden and it feels more open, less cluttered, but there's still a ton of space. And again, going back to the actual things you can store, bottles of water, larger refillable waters just fit in here no problem. It's easy to get things in and out, and it's more tidy. And the benefit of the Odyssey in the front is because it's older, there's more glass in here. There's just more visibility overall and less claustrophobia in the front space. Although the Odyssey does have the smallest armrest storage of the bunch, so that's a consideration. But again, it's a mishmash between the Odyssey winning and the Sienna coming in a very second place, very closely, followed by the Carnival in third in terms of frontal storage. The second row, this is a big thing because this is critically important to family, how you get car seats in and people. So one of the reasons why the Odyssey is going to be in first or second place, it depends on who you are, is this Odyssey is the only one where you can remove the second row seats. There's no like, you can unbolt them, pull a handle and pull them out and store them somewhere. So it turns more into a cargo van like type feel. The Sienna from out of the box, Toyota doesn't let you pull them out, but you could unbolt them. And again, so that's why the Odyssey wins in terms of being able to remove seats. However, the Sienna wins in terms of sliding seats. If you look at the way the second row slides, it's unbelievable, which means you would think, why do you need to slide a seat that much? Well, if you've ever put a car seat in, you'll know right away having the ability to slide that thing so far forward to get the car seat in, or a rear-facing car seat, what you do is you lose so much space and you have to move the driver's seat and the passenger seat so far forward in a lot of vehicles that you're jammed in there. Because the seat can go so far back in the Sienna, you don't have any of those problems. You can literally put the first row all the way back and like lean back and still have room for the kid and the car seats in the back. And that's incredible in terms of usability. And the Carnival has a similar system, but the second row it backs out where the hump is in the door, so that it looks like the Carnival's seats could go farther back. And even though the specs suggest that the Carnival has more room, it really doesn't, because the seating flexibility is not there. But the Carnival can put its second row flat, which the Sienna cannot. It only kind of limps forward a little bit, so you always have those seats in the way in the second row in the Sienna. So there's these pros and cons of all of these different vehicles. But again, going back to the Odyssey, it's the only one of the three that can slide forward and back in the second row and in and out. You can bump the two seats together in the back, which is a really unique design, along with allowing you to pull them out. So again, this isn't really what's better, but I would say the Odyssey and the Sienna are both great in terms of usability, and the Carnival is third place. Third row, depending on where that second row is, it does feel wide open. All three do a really good job, where I would say the Carnival feels the most spacious, the Sienna is very close, and the Odyssey is in third. They all have cup holders, they all have second row HVAC in all of these cars. They all have that HVAC controls in the back, so you can control all of that. The I/O or USB ports are all there. Cup holder space is there. I do find I did feel like the Carnival was the most spacious in that third row, so if you value that. Now into the cargo room in the back with the third row stowed in place. Most SUVs struggle when that third row's up. There's no space left. So we did our typical 4 luggage tests. These are 4 30-inch international luggages, and we struggle every time we travel with these things. Most vehicles do not fit. So in last place was the Odyssey. You can only fit 3 with the 4th on top with the stroller on top. It does still close, but you're blocking visibility and you can't fit much more. Next is the Carnival, and the Carnival is definitely got a ton of space. It fit all 4 with a stroller on top with room to spare, but on the outer edges of the storage, it's kind of rounded. It wasn't as easy to fit in the Carnival as it was the Sienna. And the Sienna definitely here, it dominated quite a bit. It was just easy to throw them in. There was so much room above it. You could still pack another couple suitcases in there and then have all the passengers in the vehicle without impeding on your space. So again, if you're really looking to travel, you need all of the rows up and you need the storage in the back. I would say definitely Sienna and Carnival. You just have to look at them side by side to see what I'm talking about. The Honda and the Carnival both have a rear-facing camera, so you can monitor the rear row to see if the kids are sleeping, messing around, or if you have a geriatric in the back, if they're slumped over, you can see that. The cabin talk feature, where if you want to talk to the person in the third row, the Odyssey is the most intelligible, where you can actually hear the people in the back through the speakers and they can hear you. So the cabin talk feature in the Odyssey is better combined with the camera than the usability of the Carnival, but they offer similar options. Now the big thing is the Sienna does not have that. However, it does have millimeter wave, which is a sensor in the rear roof, And what it can detect is a heartbeat or chest respiration. So many people die. People leave kids or pets in the car, and people die every year in the United States. And what it'll do is when you walk away, it'll honk the horn to alert somebody outside. So if you leave somebody in the sweltering hot, there's a better chance of them getting saved. You can tie it to their safety suite package where it'll text you or call you as well if you happen to forget. And you can also turn that system off. But there's no cameras in the Sienna for that part of it. So let's talk about safety suite and technology. In last place, the Odyssey. I mean, it just feels archaic on the inside in terms of infotainment. It's their last generation system. It does have wireless Android and Apple CarPlay, but it is slower. And the gauge cluster is more tried and true, although like the safety suite just seems to be slow and not as responsive. It just feels a generation behind. I would say all the tech inside the Odyssey feels a generation behind. On top of that, on a top trim level, it does not have a 360 camera. It has proximity sensors and a very just not clear backup camera. And I think this is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, namely if you get into modern vehicles with better 360s. These are big vehicles. You need to be able to park them, and it is harder to do in the Odyssey. Second place is the Toyota Sienna because their new infotainment is kind of tacked on. Originally, it wasn't designed for this, and they just bolted it on after the fact. Their new infotainment is way better. The software's super fast. Android Auto and Apple CarPlay work well, but the gauge cluster, how you configure safety stuff, it's removed from the infotainment. It is just kind of like a hodgepodge of stuff, and it's not the easiest to kind of navigate back and forth. Like if I told somebody where to turn off the millimeter wave, and I had to explain, there's no way you can explain it. It's just so convoluted. And that's where the actual Carnival wins in this regard. The safety suite and the tech pack is so good. It's like very close to BMW iDrive, but less complicated. It's fast. Apple and Android stuff work great in it. The safety configuration's good. It looks good. The screen quality's good, and all the safety suite while you're actually driving is tremendous. Lane keep assist is great even at high speed. All the safety stuff doesn't freak out all the time. It doesn't give you false warnings as much as the other vehicles, and it's more cohesively packaged. You can tell it's the most modern. If anything, the Kia wins in aesthetics and the overall look and feel of the tech and all of the way that the inside is. If you literally walk in all three of these vans and just look at it in terms of aesthetics, the Kia is like, you might even choose the Kia over the two until you got underneath the surface. Now, in terms of audio system tests, none of them are good. But if I had to put them in order, we objectively tested them, and it's really hard to delineate between all three. They're just all pretty averagely bad. The Sienna has the best sound quality because it's the most warm. It's the least fatiguing. And when you look at the curves themselves, again, there's more base elevation, but it doesn't tend to fall off a slope, where when you look at the Carnival, the frequency response, it kind of is like a slide. So you lose a lot of the high frequency, and the mid-range is just like, it sounds more tin can, and that's why the Carnival is the most fatiguing to listen to, and the Odyssey is not far behind. The Odyssey is just it sounds like Bluetooth speakers, like bolted to each corner of the car. So none of these audio systems are compelling enough to recommend one over the other, but if I had to say the best one, it is the JBL and the Sienna. The last thing to talk about in terms of tech parts of things is the interior space. Aesthetics are one thing, but we know beauty's only skin deep. And when you look at the beauty part, something can look great but be a total turd underneath. And I audio tested the interior noise levels and vibration, and I drove each one of these back to back. And in order, the Odyssey was continually the most refined, with the least amount of wind noise and the least amount of low frequency boom or structure-borne noise. Second was the Sienna, and the Sienna also had it's a kind of a mixed bag. The Sienna had a lot of wind noise, but it didn't have the low frequency booming or vibration that the Carnival did. While at low speeds, the Carnival did seem pretty solid. The wind noise ramped up quite a bit, and the low frequency booming is what killed it. And that's why I put it in last place. Overall, there was the most amount of noise in the Carnival, and it's not completely apparent until you really get to drive these. Last but not least, before we get in the shop, we have to talk about the overall touch points and usability. The Sienna is the best of all three in terms of having physical controls for everything that are not hyper confusing while still having some things interacted in the touchscreen. I talked about the shifter before. It's the only true mechanical one here. But if you're really looking for that tried and true old school experience, the Odyssey, because of its age, everything is in the physical realm. Nothing goes through the touchscreen in terms of HVAC controls. Where the Carnival is definitely the most modern. It has multi-connection between most of the interaction is in the touchscreen. There is some physicality, but is mostly digital in the center plane where you can switch between media and HVAC, which I don't feel is the best integrated. But again, you know, if you really value physical controls, Odyssey and Sienna are going to be your winner. If you like the touch controls and infotainment controls for everything, the Carnival is going to be your favorite. Now let's get in the shop. Jack's briefly going to hit you through the bullet points of each one of these vehicles before we take them for a drive.
In the shop with the Toyota Sienna, Honda Odyssey, and Kia Carnival. In this segment, we're going to do our best to walk you through the automotive engineering pros and cons of each one of these vehicles, how they're different, how they're similar, and of course, what they're going to cost you to run. So with that in mind, let's start with depreciation, the dirty word in the automotive space. The Sienna, from that point of view, is going to be the cheapest to run. After 3 years, you can expect to lose between like 16 and 18%, and at just over 5 years, just over 42% in total depreciation. The Honda Odyssey is next in line. After 3 years, you can expect to lose less than 30% of its total value, somewhere between 26 to 30%. And at 5 years, it's a percentage point away from the Toyota Sienna. The Kia Carnival will be the most expensive to run from this perspective. It's going to lose between 32 to 35% of its value in 3 years and almost 50 after 5. It is important to point out, however, that the Siennas are hard to get. There are long wait times, and many dealers are charging over sticker. The Honda Odyssey is relatively easy to buy at this point, as it is the oldest vehicle out of the bunch. The Kia Carnival, the V6 versions, are easy to find. However, the hybrids are on the rarer side. Some dealers have very, very long wait times, and some dealers are even charging over sticker. So if you factor in the high depreciation and paying over sticker, the Carnival is definitely on the more expensive side to run. Now, from a technical perspective, how are these vehicles similar or different? Well, they're all on their respective OEMs. Global large vehicle platforms. They're all front-wheel drive based. They're all strut front, multi-link rear. Let's start with the Honda Odyssey. It's front-wheel drive only. It's the oldest vehicle out of this bunch by far. It has the oldest body structure, and despite that, it feels more rigid over bumps and in its actual structure than even the Kia. I don't know if that's mathematically proven, but subjectively, when you're in the car, it feels like a more sturdy body structure. It's running their old V6. It's their single overhead cam V6 J-Series engine. It has VTEC, it's 3.5 liters, and it just makes over 280 horsepower and is by far the thirstiest and fastest vehicle here. It makes 0 to 60 in like 6.5 seconds. Again, 282 VTEC horses and tows around 3,500 pounds. And it gets in our 18, 17 mile loop about 20 miles per gallon, and much worse when you start accelerating hard. It does not have adaptive dampers. And the main thing from a maintenance side of things, these later Honda Odysseys are not affected by their early 1819 engine recall due to a manufacturing defect. The oil capacity is about the same as all these vehicles, but you have to do a timing belt at about 100,000 miles or 5 to 6 years. And it's going to cost you between $600 to $1,000 depending on what shop you go to. And all the tires on all three of these minivans are about the same size, and they're all going to cost you about the same. That's the same thing goes for struts, which again are all passive, brake pads and rotors. The actual maintenance cost is going to be very, very similar across all three of these. Next vehicle to talk about is the Toyota Sienna. It is on Toyota's global front-wheel drive platform. It's the only vehicle here available with all-wheel drive. If you pay an extra $2,000 at least on the base model, you can get optional all-wheel drive. It's basically a set of electric motors in the back. It's not mechanically connected. This vehicle uses the older variant of Toyota's hybrid system, the older version that isn't used in the Camry. It's used in like the RAV4 and everything else. Small battery pack, which is relatively cheap to replace and doesn't need to get replaced for well over 10 years. An eCVT and a very simple, essentially bomb-proof 2.5 liter that is definitely on the rattlier side. This is by far the most fuel efficient out of the bunch. Lastly, the Kia Carnival. This is the only vehicle that you can get in two different drivetrains for. The older, far more powerful V6, which does have quite a few engine hiccups here and there, traditional automatic gearbox, or their 1.6 liter four-cylinder hybrid setup with electric motors. It makes just over 240 horsepower, where the Sienna makes closer to 245. It tows the least here by far, though unlike the Toyota, it does not get an eCVT, which is either a pro or a con, and honestly, it's very, very similar underneath all these other vehicles. Largely steel, very little aluminum. Everything's relatively easy to get at and easy to service. So let's go take all three of these vehicles for a quick drive.
do this. Everybody wants to know what driving a Kia Carnival is like in sport mode, right?
It's a real party, Mark. We're in the hybrid variant. This is less powerful than their non-hybrid. I'm gonna say this is the quintessential Kia Hyundai in both its pros and its cons. I think the styling of the exterior and the interior, maybe not functionality, but styling for the most part, is very strong. There's a wow factor when you initially sit in this vehicle. But unlike the Honda and the Toyota, in typical Hyundai Kia fashion, I feel like a lot of the driving inputs and actual mechanics of the vehicle from a dynamics perspective were an afterthought.
We have to be really fair to the market of who's buying this.
Yes.
I think when you drive them all three back to back, knowing what we know, this has the worst body structure, and you kind of touched on how they're made in the shop, but this has by far the least rigid body, and what that translates into for a normal driver is it transmits the most amount of low frequency vibration. So you feel everything through your body. On concrete pavement, you feel that shake, like if you got extra fat on your jowls like me, you can feel it in your face. You feel it in your body.
Nixon.
Yeah, and it's very noticeable when you drive it back to back. The brake and a lot of the little detail work is not done here either. And I've struggled with this the entire time I've driven. You have 3 drive modes: Eco, Smart, and Sport. You're gonna leave this in Eco, but the brake pedal calibration, regardless of your regen, is really unnatural. It's an on and off switch. It feels different every time you hit the brakes. It's hard to be smooth. It's hard to feel like you know what the brakes are doing, combined with the fact that you have these 3 different settings in regen that never seem available. Like when you get in cold, it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. It's really, really inconsistent with regen and braking, combined with the vibration, the harshness of this car. It's one of the noisier ones to drive.
It's not just
as well.
bad for the let me take a step back. The body structure, while it's bad for the front occupant, it's worse in the second and third row. As you stretch out essentially a giant box and you give a lot of glass, you, as a compromise, strip away that body structure. So if you're an adult or a kid who's a little bit more aware of riding in a car, you're more likely to get car sick in the second and third row.
Yes.
The inputs of this car, to your point, the brake pedals and off and on switch, and this has the worst steering of all 3. I understand that in a minivan, most people don't really care about super organic inputs,
right.
But not only do you feel nothing in the steering rack, you also don't have a progressive or linear steering rack. I don't feel like the inputs
are one-to-one
throughout your entire steering input.
And that's really the overwhelming thing of this. Like, clearly, you're buying this because you want the interior, and you're willing to not think about the driving character, the quietness, the refinement, because it's just not here compared to the other vans. And the other thing that is really bothering me is you might say, well, I'm getting a hybrid. You're going to get good fuel economy, which it does get good fuel economy.
It's about 2 to 3 worse than the Sienna, which is the best of the 3. And to be fair, a lot better than the Odyssey, about 10 miles per gallon.
Right, a massive increase. Yeah. So if you're buying this, you're getting better fuel economy, and you might think, okay, well, they put a traditional transmission in here. You don't have the eCVT of the Sienna, where the CVT in the eCVT and the Sienna kind of has that rubber bandy feel. This is switching gears, but truthfully, now that I've driven this a lot, I think the transmission is a true detriment to the smoothness of driving this, because you have this problem of getting on and off throttle, and I'm going to show you because I'm sure you've never even looked at this. When I come off throttle, there's this like graduation of somewhat off throttle, and then it's like hitting a wall with regen, and you get back on the throttle, nothing, and then it's got to kick down. There's never any smoothness in its transmission engagement, because not only are you dealing with having to have the EV transition, now you're dealing with the gear hunting transition and the regen transition, depending on where you're at in your braking, and it's become very, very annoying and inconsistent in my driving of this car, and it's something that's really bothered me more so than the other 2. When you get out of the Sienna back-to-back, the Sienna is seamless. You know nothing what's going on. It just feels smooth all the time. The braking's normal. This needs a lot of work on so many different areas from a driving experience that I would definitely put this as the worst driving of the 3.
I will say, maybe in NVH, as far as when you're in a constant gear or you're driving on the highway, this is noisier than the Sienna and the Odyssey, but the drivetrain specifically the four-cylinder itself in this vehicle produces a much lower amount of noise
Yes.
than the Toyota. So if you are in gear and accelerating, this is more refined than the Sienna's drivetrain.
I think the engine isolation is better than the
Yes.
Sienna. And that's something Toyota struggles with their four cylinders. That definitely has a lower, warmer resonance to it when you get on it, and nobody's doing that. But it's something to note.
But if you're merging on the highway, you're
Right.
accelerating, the four-cylinder in all the Toyota applications sounds dreadful. It's very noisy. It's not well isolated.
This is the most anemic as well. If you're worried
Yes.
about power delivery,
This is the slowest
this
of all
is the
three.
slowest, and we've proven
in a
it.
hybrid trim level.
In the hybrid trim level, it's definitely slower, and a lot of that has to do with, I think, the way that the transmission is programmed and the way that the power is being delivered. But again, you know, if you're looking for the interior spot, the interior like livability, you're gonna love this, but drivability is definitely the worst of the three, Jack. But let's get into our drive of the Honda Odyssey.
All right, sir, let's do it. You ready for some NSX
You better not put it in
inspired?
its manual mode. Oh man. Oh.
VTEC, sir.
Oh! So, what do you think? Best engine?
If you like driving, if you, for whatever reason, if you prioritize your minivan driving experience to be the most like a sporty vehicle, the Odyssey's immediately top dog. Immediately top dog. And it's all because of this J Series VTEC V6 in the front. It is easily the fastest out of the three. In fact, I think this is faster than a Civic Si. I can't wait to one day have to rock a breeder mobile. I'm going to put an intake on the front of this thing and listen to my VTEC.
Don't worry. Don't worry.
That day's coming soon?
The day's coming soon, sir. Yeah, so let's get right into this. We just drove the Kia.
Yes.
One of the things the Kia had a problem with, just felt chintzy. Felt like a rubber band, a lot of vibration, a lot of like, it felt like a shit box, tin can, you know, like old Dodge Caravan. I mean, not that bad, but it's compared to this when you drive it back to back. And this is the advantage we have of being in these back to back to back, that you really notice the deficiencies in the Kia when you drive this.
Yes. Again, none of these cars have tremendous steering. None of them have any sort of feel. But the steering in this vehicle is more direct. Your brake pedal is well modulated. You can actually get into the brakes and be consistent in the way they feel, which means for your rear occupants, it's going to be a smoother experience. It's going to be a little bit more enjoyable for them. It's going to be a little less jerky.
It's easier to drive this thing in a smooth manner. Like if we just sit here, also, you can tell right away compared to the Carnival, and namely the Sienna, this feels more isolated. There's less vibration in it.
Yeah, open diff, V6, lots of torque.
And it's got Bridgestones as well, which definitely dominates the competition,
Oh, the
Jack.
mechanical grip, Mark. To your point, I think the body structure, low amplitude impacts is better isolated. At the higher amplitude, when it's getting into the bump stops, I do think the Sienna is a little bit softer.
Yeah, the Sienna is definitely sprung more softly. This isn't bad. It's definitely less harsh than the Kia.
Yes.
And you know, this is something that's hard for people to kind of like wrap your head around. If you have a stiffer body structure, when your body structure is more rigid, you can use more isolators and you can use softer spring rates, or even harsher spring rates or higher spring rates, and you can get a more comfortable riding car. When your body is a giant rubber band, none of those things work as well, and you get a lot of the problems that the Kia has that this doesn't.
Yes. The thing I need to bring up, though, is despite this being the best to drive in the dry, compared to the Sienna, again, this car only comes as a front-wheel drive vehicle. It is open diff. Even when you run snow tires, or if it's wet out, you're going to run into the traction limited issues of only sending your power to the front of this car.
And this has been a big problem for the V6 front-wheel drive Honda products, and it goes back for a long time. This reminds me a lot of the old Accord V6, where when you get it in the wet, even with traction stability control on, or definitely in the snow, this is not something to be trifled with. You have to run a dedicated winter tire for good stability in this.
Yes.
And because of the open diff in the front, it's leaning on its brake system and stability control a lot more than the Sienna. Like, you don't notice it in the Sienna, and you don't notice it in the Carnival as much as this. Although I will say the Carnival has far more torque steer. When you're turning, it's tugging on the wheel. This doesn't do that as much as that.
No, not at all. As I get pushed out of the seat. These seats do not have any sort of great stability.
Yeah, because that's exactly what people will care about. Yeah, so the main thing is, right, what does it do really well? If you're using this as a family hauler, it still maintains really good compliance. It's soft most of the time.
Yes.
It's confidence-inspired to drive. It feels nimble. It doesn't feel as big, and it doesn't drive as big as the Sienna and the Kia. Its negative attributes are its technology, bad fuel economy, bad compared to the two. When you're doing back-to-back, this could be a deal breaker for you.
It's like between 10 and 15 worse than the Sienna.
Yes, and my real world was close to 17 when you're really driving it, maybe 20 on a good day. The other part is it lacks the technology features of the Kia. This looks 2 generations old compared to the Kia. And even the Sienna, you know, like, just basic stuff, lane keep assist, the cruise control functions doesn't work as well here, and then the camera systems are, you know, laughable, like really. And for as big of a vehicle and people's expectations that are here, this is going to be a big letdown, despite the positives that it does well.
I do think this gearbox. I haven't driven the original Odyssey gearbox, but their latest variants of this. It does a lot of gear hunting.
Yeah, no,
it does a lot of gear hunting, and these paddles essentially don't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, the paddles are, nobody's going to use those anyway. I mean, the only reason you'd use it is maybe just like on the highway. I think, you know, like none of these cars you're going to use the transmission. You want it to disappear in the background, and the Sienna does the best job of just disappearing. I would say this does. It's far better than the Kia because it's got less going on, right?
And it is, you know, ignoring the VTEC thing. To your point, no one's going to drive these things hard. The V6 is just smoother and more isolated from the cabin.
And it feels less strained.
Yes.
You know, that's something that the Kia that struggles with. And I'm not going to say that top gear acceleration, when this gets up to its highest gear and it's lugging, sometimes you'll get a lugging effect. But the Kia feels like that a lot. Whereas this kind of, it always feels like it's ready to go. You're not waiting a lot, and it's got a really warm resonance. It's a more pleasing vehicle to be in.
Not that any of these vehicles are sporty, but if you do like driving and you don't want your 3-row minivan to feel like a total penalty box behind the wheel, if you have to go to, you know, I don't know where you live, if you live somewhere outside of the Midwest where there are turns associated with your drive, in the dry, the Odyssey is the clear winner.
Last but not least, the fan favorite in sport mode.
There's that ECVT in 4-cylinder I know and love.
Let's listen to her. Oh, she's bucking. 2 things. It's by far the most noisy in terms of engine, which not a big surprise. Toyota's 4-cylinders are raucous. It also allows
you to... All the musicality of a garbage disposal, sir.
Pretty much. It also allows you to brake torque it, unlike the hybrid Carnival, which is interesting, and another point that nobody cares about. So let's let's talk about.
You gonna turn off traction stability controls? We get into some curves.
Yeah, you might as well.
I really want to
safe.
feel that Acura Toyota approved handling balance.
Yeah, you know, that's fine, just to be safe. You're right. So let's talk about it, Jack. You're here. This is the newest van of the bunch. It has the latest updates. Hybrid drivetrain by default. Best fuel economy by at least a couple percentage points.
3 or 4 over the the Carnival in our loop. So we drove each car for, it's like 18 miles or 15 miles on the exact same loop all at the same time. The Odyssey broke, what is it, 20 miles per gallon, if that?
Yeah, probably.
And then I think the Carnival just did around 30, and this thing did like 33.
And what's important to note is if you drive it very, very conservatively, you're still getting a better fuel economy in here. And when you drive this very hard, you're still getting better fuel economy. So there's no question that how they have this set up.
And this has all-wheel drive, unlike the other two.
Yeah, huge selling point. I mean, you're already at a massive advantage with this and the eCVT part of it. You have a massive advantage with the eCVT because you don't have the gears to deal with as well, so it just has a better efficiency out of the gate. And Jack, the big selling point, we're on Bridgestones. The best tires of the bunch.
Just an incredible handling bounce this thing has with its lift kit. Something to bring up, and I brought it up in the shop just because this is what was available in the press. We have driven the highest end trim level with all the luxury package. This is the Woodland, which means it comes with a slight lift. So technically, this is the worst handling out of the bunch. It's the softest.
Yeah, for sure.
When it comes to its dry grip, this being all-wheel drive or available. The understeer in the oncoming lane.
Well, there's plenty of room for runoff with the understeer.
And with the lift kit, you're good. You're not going to rip off your bumper when you put it in a ditch.
When I'm off-roading, when I'm rock crawling with this thing.
What this does get, I mean, no one's, well, other than you, no one's limit handling their Sienna in bad weather, right? As we recommend always, get snow tires in all three of these vehicles.
For sure.
But in bad weather, the fact that you have propulsion from the rear and the front, it should get you in and out of corners better, at least here in the Midwest, in areas that you experience snow and sleet and lots of wet. 4 months out of the year, I think that all-wheel drive is going to go a long way.
It's a huge advantage. When you're talking about certain cars, you can downplay not everybody needs all-wheel drive. I think as I've driven all three of these minivans back to back, and we've driven them very hard too, the deficiencies between each one gets wider and wider. What a real person is going to need out of a van or a family car becomes more apparent. The safety suite in the Kia is something you can trust and lean on, like the 360 camera, and all of that is so critically important. Those things that you need, backup cameras, all the tech in the Kia is a big selling point, where this is kind of like, can you wave this guy by? Oh, he's gonna pass.
Fiesta man.
He can't handle the van. There's so many things between these cars that the nuances of them, of what a family wants, and all-wheel drive is a massive one. It cannot be downplayed.
I don't disagree. When it comes to ride quality and overall body isolation, I think this is a more isolated experience than the Carnival. I think it's very, very close to the Odyssey. How do you think the Odyssey drives better, this turn-in, overall driving dynamics? But when it comes to refinement, smoothness, body isolation, how do you think this compares to the Odyssey?
I think the Odyssey has the advantage of, it seems like they've put more work into the body structure to isolate low-frequency vibrations out.
Yeah, bumps.
Bumps. You feel a far less washboard effect. That booming is less in the Odyssey. It is the most refined driving. It feels more like a sedan. It's still minivan-ish, but it feels more sedan than minivan-ish. I think they've isolated out a lot of that big box feeling.
Despite it being an old body structure.
Yes, and it's sad because where it lags behind, it makes up for other things, clearly. This, in terms of driving dynamics, solidness, is better than the Kia. The all-wheel drive stuff is a huge benefit to its driving experience. This feels more substantial.
I know the Pacifica isn't here on this test, but I also think it drives much better than the Pacifica does.
It does.
Yes.
It definitely does. And I guess there's a lot to kind of dissect in the final thoughts between these three cars, really. But it's pretty apparent at this point, just us talking through the three, where the advantages and
I think this is the most
are.
Balanced out of the three that we're testing, right? You get great fuel economy, low running costs, you have the all-wheel drive. It's not a total boat like the Kia is, but it's not as I hate to say
it's not as
nimble.
harsh either.
Yeah.
It maintains poise without feeling like a boat, and it's not harsh like the Kia is. And the big selling point of this as a hybrid is the hybrid part works. It disappears in the background. It's not weird. Your brake pedal feel isn't like, let me figure out
It's
what
like
I'm doing.
every other Toyota.
Yeah, everything feels naturally tuned and cohesive, and it's going to function as that day-to-day car you're never going to think about and never going to have to worry about, honestly.
All right, Mark. So let's have you wrap this up with the final thoughts, sir. Tell me all about my 3 spawn haulers.
Okay, I will. You can count on that. So here we are, the conclusion, the minivan extravaganza. You're probably going to be looking for a clear look at what the best and the worst is. And I think as we've gone along, there's a mixed bag between all 3. Starting with the Carnival, which really comes in last place. And it does because they decided to make this more SUV than minivan. They've avoided using the minivan name, which if you're putting this in your garage, you want the extreme usability that a minivan has. And the interior space, there's too many compromises. While it does have the best safety suite, the best tech, and some of the best aesthetics inside and out, and cargo capacity is also good, it's the worst driving of the bunch. It has the most low frequency and structure-borne noise. It's got a lot of wind noise, and the drivetrain, to be fair, is overcomplicated. Once you see how well the Toyota transmission and engine are calibrated despite its noisiness, it just blends into the background and delivers good fuel economy, where the Carnival has to use a traditional automatic transmission, which really doesn't help it here. The fuel economy is worse. It's still the slowest vehicle in the bunch. And I mean, I could go on and on. Let's talk about the second place vehicle. That's the Odyssey, and it's incredible that it's still performing at its level despite it being as old as it is, but it loses out in a few different areas. Its aesthetics aren't great. The interior tech is not good. No 360 cameras available, which is important in this segment. The safety suite is definitely the most behind of the other vehicles. And of course, well, some of the usability or cargo capacity isn't as good as the other vehicles. And the fuel economy is abysmal. So, you know, why would you choose the Odyssey? Well, it's got all the physical controls, got some of the tried and true VTEC engine, naturally aspirated V6, which is pretty much a last of its kind, and it's the best driving of the bunch. So that comes to the first place vehicle, and the Sienna is kind of your best bet. Why? Because you're gonna buy it and you're not gonna lose your ass on it. Even 10, 15-year-old versions of the Sienna have maintained their value. They're on the road forever. People rave about their reliability. And with this generation, you get way better fuel economy, the best of the bunch by a large margin, whether you're driving like a monkey or just cruising around. It's got the best drivetrain in terms of blending in the background, although it is the noisiest. It blends the best tech solutions in terms of safety, interior, usability. It finds that blend between modern and old on the interior space, and it still has really, really good cargo capacity and usability with the second row that slides around. Now with the updates, you get a fridge, a vacuum. They're really trying to keep this van up to date. The problem is availability. And the Sienna continues to be difficult to get. You have to wait for it. The dealers are gonna jerk you around and mark these things up, and I've seen it firsthand, where the Odyssey is a little bit easier to get. And although the Carnival's not made in mass yet, in hybrid version, that's still harder to get. What you're paying for the Sienna, it has the best residuals, the best car you want to own the long term. If you like to drive, the Odyssey is better. If you want to keep something long term, well, the Sienna wins this test. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.